Captain Dongwoo Park sat in his old chair on the bridge of the Seoul Dawn. The cargo ship was not pretty to look at. Its metal walls were scratched and dented from years of space travel, but it was his ship, and it had never let him down. "How long until we jump?" Dongwoo asked his navigator. Tae-ho Lee looked at his computer screen. Numbers and star maps filled the display. "About 10 minutes, Captain. The engines are ready." Jinnie Kim crawled out from under a control panel. Her hands were dirty with oil and her hair was messy. "The jump drive is working fine," she said. "It might make some noise, but it will get us where we need to go." Bo-ram Choi sat at her station, listening to radio signals from space. Most of the time, space was quiet. Today was no different. "Nothing on the radio, Captain," she reported. Woo Jin. Yang checked his security screens. As the ship's security chief, he kept watch for pirates or other dangers. "All clear out here," he said. The Seoul Dawn was carrying machine parts to a mining colony 3 star systems away. It was boring work, but it paid the bills. Dongwoo had been running cargo for 15 years. He had seen asteroid fields, space storms, and broken space stations. Nothing surprised him anymore. "Jump in 5 minutes," Tae-ho announced. Dongwoo pressed a button on his chair. His voice went to all parts of the ship. "All crew, prepare for hyperspace jump. Strap in." The crew had done this hundreds of times. Jinnie wiped her hands clean and sat down. Bo-ram put on her safety belt. Woo Jin secured his weapons. Tae-ho double-checked his calculations one more time. "Jump in 30 seconds, Tae-ho said. Space. Outside the windows began to change. Stars stretched into long white lines. The ship's engines hummed louder and louder. "Jump." Tae-ho pressed the big red button. The Seoul Dawn disappeared from normal space and entered hyperspace. For a few seconds, everything was quiet. Then the ship shook and rattled as it flew faster than light toward its destination. Hyperspace jumps usually lasted about 6 hours. The crew used this time to eat, sleep, or fix things around the ship. Dongwoo was reading reports when the ship suddenly stopped shaking. "That was fast," he said. "Are we there already?" Tae-ho looked confused. "No, Captain. We should still be in hyperspace for 4 more hours." Jinnie checked her engine displays. "The jump drive shut itself off. Everything looks normal, though." "Where are we?" Dongwoo asked. Tae-ho worked on his computer. "I'm not sure. Let me check our position." Bo-ram turned on the outside cameras. "Captain," she said in a strange voice, "you need to see this." Dongwoo looked at the main screen. His mouth opened. In surprise, they were in the middle of a space battle. Hundreds of alien ships fought around them. The ships were like nothing from Earth. Some looked like giant crystals that glowed with inner light. Others were smooth and curved like seashells. Bright beams of energy flew between the ships like deadly rainbows. "Well," Dongwoo said after a moment, "that's new." The alien ships were huge. Even the smallest ones were 10 times bigger than the Seoul Dawn. Some were so large they looked like flying cities. The weapons they used lit up space with colors that hurt to look at. "GNA damage report," Dongwoo said, as calm as if they had found a traffic jam. Jinnie checked all her systems. "No damage, Captain, we're fine." "Bo-ram, see if you can get those folks on the radio." Bo-ram tried different frequencies. "I'm getting signals, but I can't understand them. The computer is trying to translate. Tae-ho, plot us a course around this mess." Tae-ho studied the battle. "I can get us out of here, Captain. It might take a few minutes." The alien ships had stopped, fighting. All of them were now pointing toward the Seoul Dawn. Dongwoo could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching his little cargo ship. "I think we got their attention," Woo Jin said. His hand moved toward his weapon controls. One of the crystal ships moved closer. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Lights pulsed through its transparent walls like a heartbeat. The ship was so big that the Seoul Dawn could have fit inside it 100 times. Bo-ram's computer made a beeping sound. "Captain, I'm getting a translation. Someone wants to talk to us." "Put it on speaker," Dongwoo said. A voice filled the bridge. It sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Unknown vessel. You will identify yourself immediately. State your..." Allegiance to the hegemony of stellar dominions or the coalition of free minds. Choose quickly or be destroyed. The crew looked at each other. None of them had ever heard of either group. This is Captain Park of the independent vessel Sol Dawn, Dongwu replied. We're just passing through. Mind if we grab some coffee while you folks sort this out? Silence. All. The alien ships stopped moving. The energy weapons powered down. For the first time in who knows how long, the space battle was completely quiet. Boram checked her radio. Captain, I think we broke their communications. Teho watched his screens. All the ships have stopped. They're just floating there. Jin'ei looked at the engine readings. Should I start the engines? We could leave right now. Wu Jin studied the alien ships through his targeting system. I count over 300 ships out there. If they want to fight us, we're in trouble. Dongwu thought for a moment. In 15 years of space travel, he had learned that most problems could be solved with politeness and common sense. Aliens probably weren't much different from difficult customers. The metal voice came back on the radio. You request coffee? Well, sure, Dongwu said. It's been a long day, but don't let us stop you from whatever you were doing. We'll just head on our way. More silence. Another voice came on the radio. This one sounded like wind blowing through trees. Captain Park, I am Admiral Vex Prima Zolthane of the Imperial Navy. In 3,000 years of recorded history, no species has ever responded to our fleet with casual politeness. Dongwu shrugged, even though the aliens couldn't see him. Well, there's a first time for everything, I guess, Jin'ei whispered to Boram. 3,000 years? How old are these guys? Boram whispered back. Old enough to have really big ships. Admiral Zolthane spoke again. Captain Park, you and your crew will accompany us to Imperial Station Nexus 7 for processing. This is not a request. That's fine with us, Dongwu said. But we've got a delivery to make. Can we stop by the mining colony first? It'll only take a day. The radio was quiet for a long time. Finally, Admiral Zolthane spoke. Captain Park, you have entered the territory of a galactic empire spanning 10,000 worlds. You are surrounded by warships that could destroy planets, and you want to make a delivery? Well, yes, Dongwu said. We gave our word. The miners are expecting their parts. Wu Jin looked at his captain like he was crazy. Teho buried his face in his hands. Jin'ei started laughing quietly. Boram just shook her head. Captain, Admiral Zolthane said slowly. What species are you? Human, Dongwu replied. From Earth. Nice to meet you. The radio went silent again. Outside, the alien ships began, moving into formation around the Sol Dawn, but they kept their weapons powered down. I think, Dongwu said to his crew, we're about to have an interesting day. 3 days later, the humans were still on Imperial Station Nexus 7. They had become famous throughout the station. Aliens came from other levels just to see the beings who had no psychic powers, but could make computers work better than anyone else. Dongwu was having coffee in the station's food court when a small alien approached his table. It looked like a cross between a cat and a bird, with soft fur and feathers covering its body. Its large eyes darted around nervously. Captain Park, it whispered. I am Commander Kethra of the Coalition of Free Minds. May I speak with you privately? Dongwu looked around the busy food court. This seems private enough. What can I do for you? Kethra sat down carefully. The Coalition has been fighting the Empire for generations. We believe in freedom and equality for all species regardless of psychic ability. That sounds reasonable, Dongwu said. We need allies who think differently than the Empire. Your species might be exactly what we need. Dongwu sipped his coffee. It wasn't very good, but it was coffee. What kind of help are you looking for? Kethra pulled out a small device that projected a holographic map. The Empire controls most of the galaxy through psychic dominance. They can read minds, predict enemy movements, and coordinate their fleets through mental links. And you can't do the same? We can, but we're not as good at it. The Empire has been in power for thousands of years. They've perfected psychic warfare. Dongwu studied the map. It showed the galaxy divided between red areas controlled by the Empire and blue areas held by the Coalition. The red areas were much larger. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Dongwu asked. Kethra tilted its head. I don't understand. It's an old human saying. When something isn't working, sometimes you need to stop doing it the same way and try something different. What do you mean? Well, you're fighting a psychic war against people who are better at psychic warfare than you are. Maybe you should try fighting a non-psychic war instead. Kethra stared at him. That's crazy enough to work. Over. The next few days, the crew of the Soul Dawn found themselves meeting with Coalition representatives. They shared ideas about non-psychic technology and tactics. The aliens listened with growing excitement. Jin'ei explained backup systems to Coalition engineers. What happens when your psychic networks fail? They don't fail, an engineer replied. They've been working for thousands of years. But what if they did? What if the Empire found a way to jam your mental communications? The engineer looked worried. We never thought of that. That's why you need backup systems. Simple machines that work even when everything else fails. Boram worked with Coalition communications officers. The problem with telepathic communication is that the Empire can listen in, she explained. But if you use different languages or codes, they can't understand what you're saying. But learning new languages takes years of mental conditioning, a communications officer said. Not if you do it the human way. We can teach you methods that work without psychic enhancement. Wu Jin talked to Coalition military leaders about tactics. You're fighting the same way you've always fought. That's why you keep losing. Our tactics are based on thousands of years of experience, a military leader argued. Experience fighting other psychic species, Wu Jin pointed out. But what if you fought like non-psychic species? What if you used weapons and strategies the Empire has never seen before? Taeho showed Coalition navigators how to plot courses without psychic guidance. If the Empire can predict where your fleets are going by reading your navigators' minds, then you need navigators who don't use their minds to navigate. How is that possible? Math and computers. The stars don't lie, and mathematics doesn't have thoughts for the Empire to read. Meanwhile, Captain Dongwu was having the most important conversation of all. He was talking to Admiral Zolthane about the bigger picture. The Empire has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, the Admiral explained. We brought peace and order to hundreds of species. By force? Dongwu asked. By necessity. Lesser species need guidance from their superiors. Who decided who was superior? Admiral Zolthane looked uncomfortable. Psychic ability determines intelligence and worthiness. It has always been this way. Always. Since the beginning of galactic civilization. Dongwu leaned back in his chair. On Earth, we used to think that way too. We thought some groups of humans were better than others based on skin color or where they were born. It took us a long time to figure out we were wrong. This is different. Psychic ability can be measured scientifically. Can it? Have you ever met a species without psychic abilities before us? The Admiral was quiet for a moment. No. So how do you know psychic ability equals intelligence? Maybe you've just never had a control group to test your theory. That evening, the crew of the Soul Dawn met in their ship to discuss what they had learned. These Coalition folks seem nice, Jin'ei said. But they're losing this war badly. The Empire isn't evil, Boram added. They genuinely believe they're helping everyone. They just have some wrong ideas about how intelligence works. Both sides are stuck fighting the same way, Wu Jin observed. Neither side knows how to adapt. Taeho pulled up star charts on his computer. The Coalition controls maybe 20% of the galaxy. At the rate they're losing territory, they'll be defeated within 50 years. Dongwu thought about everything they had seen and heard. So we have an empire that thinks psychic ability makes them superior, and a rebellion that's fighting the empire using the same methods that got them beaten in the first place. Pretty much, Jin'ei agreed, and both sides want our help. The Coalition wants us to join them, Boram said. The Empire wants to study us and maybe use our technology. What do you think we should do, Captain? Wu Jin asked. Dongwu was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I think we should do what we always do. Help where we can, be honest about what we think, and try not to make things worse. The next day, coalition ships arrived at Imperial Station Nexus 7. Under normal circumstances, this would have started a battle. Instead, Commander Kethra had requested a meeting with Admiral Zolthane to discuss new tactical possibilities. The meeting was held in the Sol Dawn's small conference room, the only neutral ground both sides could agree on. Admiral Zolthane sat on one side, tall and crystalline. Commander Kethra sat on the other, small and furry. Between them sat 5 humans who had accidentally become the most important diplomats in the galaxy. The coalition proposes a temporary ceasefire, Commander Kethra announced. We want to test new tactical methods that don't rely on psychic warfare. Admiral Zolthane looked skeptical. What kind of methods? Methods that humans have taught us, Kethra replied. Non-psychic communication, kinetic weapons, mathematical navigation, and backup systems. You want to fight like primitives? We want to fight like humans, Kethra corrected. And humans aren't primitive, they're different. Admiral Zolthane turned to Dongwu. What is your opinion, Captain? I think both sides are so focused on being right that you've forgotten to think about being effective, Dongwu said. Maybe, instead of fighting about who's superior, you should work together to solve problems. Impossible. The Empire and Coalition have been enemies for centuries. Then maybe it's time to try something new. Wu Jin spoke up. Admiral, you said the Empire brought peace to the galaxy. Is it still peaceful if you're fighting a war? The Coalition started this conflict by rejecting Imperial authority. Commander Kethra bristled. The Empire started it by enslaving entire species. See? Dongwu said. You're both so busy arguing about the past that you can't work on the future. Jin'ei added. On Earth, we learned that the best solutions usually come from combining different ideas, not from one side winning everything. Admiral Zolthane and Commander Kethra looked at each other across the small table. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Admiral Zolthane said, What exactly are you proposing? Imperial Station Nexus 7 was the biggest thing the humans had ever seen. It was like a city floating in space, with towers and domes stretching in all directions. Ships the size of buildings flew in and out of huge docking bays. Lights blinked, everywhere like stars. Look at the size of that thing, Tejo said as the Sol Dawn followed an escort ship toward the station. It's beautiful, Boram added. And scary. The docking bay they entered was so large that 50 ships like theirs could have fit inside easily. Robot arms grabbed the Sol Dawn and pulled it gently to a landing pad. Through the windows they could see aliens walking around on the deck below. Remember, Dongwu told his crew, we're guests here. Be polite, be honest, and don't touch anything unless they say it's okay. A tall, thin alien with 6 arms and big black eyes walked up to their ship. It wore a blue uniform covered with symbols that probably meant important things. Behind it came 4 guards with weapons that hummed with energy. That must be our welcoming committee, Wu Jin said. The alien spoke into a device on its belt. A moment later, Boram's computer translated its words. Greetings, humans, I am Sub-Commander Thys. You will follow me for processing. The crew left their ship and walked with Sub-Commander Thys through the station. The hallways were huge, built for beings much larger than humans. The walls were covered with writing in dozens of different languages. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked by, stopping to stare at the humans. They seem curious about us, Jin'ei observed. Can you blame them? Dongwu replied. We're probably the first humans they've ever seen. Sub-Commander Thys led them to an office filled with desks and computer screens. It was like any government office, except everything was 3 times normal size. The alien sat behind a desk and picked up several forms with its many hands. State your species, home world, technological level, psychic classification, and political allegiance, it said. Human, Earth, pretty good with machines, we don't read minds, and independent. Dongwu answered. Sub-Commander Thys looked confused. Please be more specific. What is your psychic classification on the galactic standard scale? We don't have psychic powers, Boram said. Humans can't read minds or move things with their thoughts. The alien dropped all its papers. That's impossible. All intelligent species have some level of psychic ability. Well, we don't, Tejo said. We use computers and math to figure things out. Sub-Commander Thys picked up its papers with a frustrated look. This is going to take weeks. There are no forms for non-psychic species. Jin'ei pulled out her tablet computer. Maybe I can help. I brought some digital forms we use for customs back home. Would those work? The alien stared at the small device. What is that? It's a computer. A really simple one. Jin'ei showed the screen to Sub-Commander Thys. See? I can fill out forms, store information, and send data to other computers. But how does it work without psychic interfaces? Electricity. And silicon chips, Jin'ei explained. Basic stuff. Sub-Commander Thys examined the tablet like it was magic. Fascinating. May I see how it works? For the next 2 hours, Jin'ei showed the alien how human computers worked. She explained programming, data storage, and user interfaces. Sub-Commander Thys asked hundreds of questions and took notes with all 6 hands. This is remarkable, the alien finally said. Your simple computer is more efficient than our psychic networks in many ways. It never gets tired, never loses focus, and never has bad thoughts that interfere with the data. That's the idea, Jin'ei said. Machines do what they're programmed to do. Meanwhile, Boram was working on the language problem. The universal translator kept making mistakes with Korean words and concepts. She decided to learn the alien language instead. Could you teach me your language? She asked Sub-Commander Thys. The translator isn't working very well. The alien looked surprised. Learning Galactic Standard usually takes years of mental conditioning and psychic enhancement. I'll try without those, Boram said. Sub-Commander Thys began teaching her basic words and grammar. By lunchtime, Boram was asking simple questions. By evening, she was having conversations. By the next morning, she was correcting the translator's mistakes. Impossible, Sub-Commander Thys muttered. How do you learn so fast without psychic assistance? Practice, Boram said. And we have good memory training methods on Earth. While this was happening, Wujin was causing excitement at the station's security center. An alien security chief wanted to see human weapons, so Wujin agreed to demonstrate at their shooting range. The range was designed for energy weapons that shot beams of light or plasma. Wujin pulled out his pistol, which fired simple metal bullets. This is your weapon? The security chief asked. It was a large armored being with 4 eyes. It looks very primitive. It gets the job done, Wujin said. He aimed at a target and fired 3 shots. The bullets punched clean through the target and kept going through the wall behind it. Alarms started ringing. The bullets had gone through 3 more walls before stopping. Your barriers didn't stop them? Wujin asked. Our energy shields are designed to stop plasma and particle beams, the security chief explained. No one has used kinetic projectiles in thousands of years. Why not? Because they're so simple. Wujin reloaded his pistol. Simple works. Word spread quickly through the station about the strange humans. Scientists came to study Jin'ei's computer. Linguists wanted to talk to Boram. Military officers questioned Wujin about his weapons. Tejo attracted attention from the navigation department. Imperial ships used psychic navigators who could sense the flow of space and time. Tejo used star charts and mathematics. How do you navigate without space sense? An alien navigator asked. It looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. I measure the positions of stars and calculate our route based on their gravitational effects, Tejo explained. That sounds very complicated. It's just math. The computer does most of the work. The alien navigator studied Tejo's charts and calculations. This is actually more accurate than our psychic methods. How is that possible? Math doesn't have feelings or get tired, Tejo said. Stars always behave according to physical laws. Admiral Zolthane arrived at the station that evening. The tall, elegant alien looked like it was made of living crystal, with light flowing through its transparent body. It walked with grace and power that made everyone around it seem small. So these are the humans, it said, looking at the crew of the Sol Dawn. Yes, Admiral, Sub-Commander Thiss reported. They are unusual. How so? They have no psychic abilities, but their technology works better than ours in many ways. They learn our language without mental enhancement. Their weapons penetrate our best defenses, and their captain treats galactic politics like customer service. Admiral Zolthane studied the humans with interest. Tell me about your species development. Dongwu thought for a moment. We started with rocks and sticks. Then we learned to use fire, grow food, and build tools. We invented writing, mathematics, and machines. We fought a lot of wars, but we also learned to work together. Eventually, we figured out how to travel between stars. Without psychic abilities, we didn't know psychic abilities existed until today. The Admiral was quiet for a long time. In 3,000 years of galactic history, every species we've encountered developed psychic powers before achieving space travel. You are unique. Is that good or bad? Jin'ei asked. I'm not sure yet, Admiral Zolthane replied. The galaxy is divided into categories based on psychic ability. The ascended are pure energy beings. The elevated are highly psychic. Standard species have telepathic abilities. Lesser species have minimal psychic power. Where do we fit? Dongwu asked. That's the problem. You don't fit anywhere in our system. Sub-Commander Thiss spoke up. Admiral, the humans have completed their processing. What should we do with them? Admiral Zolthane considered this. We will offer them lesser status in the Empire. They seem harmless enough. Thanks for the offer, Dongwu said politely. But we'll stick with independent for now. The Admiral looked shocked. You're refusing Imperial citizenship? We're not refusing anything, we just prefer to stay independent. Nothing personal. For the second time in 2 days, the humans had done something no one expected. No species had ever turned down Imperial citizenship. Admiral Zolthane stared at them for a long moment. Then it did something no one had ever seen before. It laughed. 6 months after the first Void Shepherd attack, the Sol Dawn was leading the largest fleet in galactic history. It was not leading because it was the biggest ship or had the most powerful weapons. The cargo freighter was still old, dented, and held together with spare parts and hope. But it was the only ship in the fleet that the Void Shepherds couldn't track or affect, making it the perfect flagship for a war against psychic nightmares. Dongwu sat in his captain's chair, surrounded by communication screens showing Imperial and Coalition commanders from across the galaxy. Admiral Zolthane's crystal form flickered on one screen while Commander Kethra appeared on another. Dozens of other alien faces filled the remaining displays. Final status reports, Dongwu said, as calmly as if he was organizing a delivery. Schedule. Sector 7 reports all Void Shepherds eliminated, Admiral Zolthane announced. Imperial and Coalition forces worked together using human tactics. No casualties. Sector 12 successful, Commander Kethra added. The creatures retreated when we shut down our psychic networks and attacked with kinetic weapons. Similar reports came from all across the galaxy. The war that had seemed hopeless 6 months ago was finally turning in favor of the living. Jin'ei looked up from her engineering station. Captain, I'm getting strange readings from the deep void. The dimensional rifts the Void Shepherds came through are closing. Is that good news? Teho asked. I think so. It means no more Void Shepherds can get through from wherever they came from. Boram monitored communications from the fleet. The last group of creatures is retreating toward the galactic rim. Our ships are pursuing them, but they're moving. Too fast to catch. Let them go, Dongwu said. They're running away, that's good enough. Wu Jin studied his tactical displays. Captain, we won. We actually won. The crew of the Sol Dawn looked at each other in amazement. They had gone from making simple cargo deliveries to saving the galaxy in less than a year. I still can't believe it worked, Jin'ei said. We taught the entire galaxy to fight without psychic powers, and they actually did it. Desperation is a great teacher, Dongwu replied. When people's lives are at stake, they learn fast. Over the following weeks, the galaxy began to rebuild. But this time, things were different. The old system based on psychic hierarchy had been shattered by the Void Shepherd invasion. Species that had been considered lesser had fought alongside elevated beings as equals. Non-psychic technology had proven as valuable as psychic abilities. Admiral Zolthane visited the Sol Dawn for what had become weekly planning meetings. The proud Imperial leader now worked closely with coalition commanders and human advisors. The Empire is changing, it told Dongwu. We're integrating human-style backup systems into all our technology. We're also reconsidering our classification system for species. That's good to hear, Dongwu said. What about the coalition, Commander? Kethra, who had been listening from across the room, spoke up. The coalition is changing too. We're working with Imperial scientists to develop better non-psychic weapons and communication systems. Many of our worlds want to learn human languages and mathematics. And what about the war between you two? Admiral Zolthane and Commander Kethra looked at each other. What war? They said together, then laughed. The old conflict seems pretty silly now, Admiral Zolthane admitted. We were fighting about who was superior while an ancient enemy was getting ready to eat us all. We have decided to form a new government, Commander Kethra added. The Galactic Federation, Imperial worlds, coalition worlds, and independent systems, all working together. With separate seats for psychic and non-psychic species, Admiral Zolthane said, we realized that different types of intelligence can solve different types of problems. Dongwu smiled. That sounds like a good plan. The humans were offered positions as advisors, ambassadors, or leaders in the new federation. They politely declined, just as they had turned down Imperial citizenship months earlier. We appreciate the offer, Dongwu told the assembled galactic leaders, but we're independent contractors. We like our freedom. But the galaxy needs human wisdom, Admiral Zolthane protested. You saved us all. We just did our jobs, Jin'ei said, the same way we always do. Besides, Boram added, we're not going anywhere. You can call us if you need help. And we'll keep trading with everyone, Tejo said. Human-style backup systems aren't going to deliver themselves. Plus, Wu Jin concluded, someone needs to make sure you folks don't start any more galactic wars. The crew of the Sol Dawn returned to their old job of hauling cargo between star systems. But now their routes included hundreds of alien worlds, and their cargo holds carried advanced technology alongside basic supplies. They installed human-style backup systems on Imperial stations. They taught coalition engineers how to build kinetic weapons. They delivered translation computers to worlds learning human languages for the first time. Most importantly, they carried ideas. The concept that different approaches to problems could be equally valid spread throughout the galaxy. Species began collaborating in ways they never had before. Psychic beings learned non-psychic methods, while non-psychic species developed their own versions of mental disciplines. 1 year after, accidentally entering galactic politics, Captain Dongwu Park was writing his log entry for another successful delivery. Cargo delivered to New Terra Colony. 50 tons of computer components, 30 tons of kinetic weapon ammunition, and 1 set of diplomatic protocols for handling disputes between psychic and non-psychic species. Payment received in galactic, credits and local currency, customer satisfaction high. He paused and looked around the bridge of his old ship. Jin'ei was upgrading their engines with technology that combined Imperial power systems with human backup circuits. Boram was teaching navigation to a young alien who wanted to learn non-psychic space travel. Tejo was plotting their next route to a coalition world that needed help setting up communication networks. Wu Jin was cleaning kinetic weapons that had become standard equipment on exploration ships across the galaxy. Additional notes, Dongwu continued dictating to his computer. The galaxy is a much more interesting place than it was a year ago. People are learning that there's usually more than one way to solve a problem. They're also learning that the best solutions often come from working together instead of fighting about who's in charge. He looked out at the stars streaming past the Sol Dawn's windows. The crew of this vessel continues to be amazed by how much trouble you can avoid by treating people with respect and offering to help when you can. We recommend this approach to other cargo haulers and anyone else who might accidentally save. The galaxy. Ginny looked up from her work. Are you really putting that in the official log? Why not? Dongwu replied. It's the truth. What's our next delivery? Taeho asked. Dongwu checked his schedule. Medical supplies to the Andromeda research station, followed by a load of educational materials for the new Galactic University. After that, we're hauling construction equipment to help build the first mixed psychic kinetic shipyard. Sounds like a busy month, Boram said. The best kind, Wu Jin added. As the Sol Dawn jumped into hyperspace toward its next destination, none of the crew thought about how they had changed galactic civilization forever. To them, they were just doing their jobs the same way they always had. With competence, cooperation, and the unshakable belief that most problems could be solved if you approached them with common sense. Behind them, the galaxy continued to rebuild, itself according to principles the humans had accidentally taught it. Different species working together, multiple approaches to the same problems, respect for all types of intelligence, and somewhere in the deep void between galaxies, the surviving void shepherds huddled in the darkness, telling each other stories about the terrifying creatures called humans who couldn't be sensed, couldn't be controlled, and wouldn't be impressed by cosmic horror. They decided to find a different galaxy to terrorize. The Sol Dawn flew on through the stars, carrying cargo and common sense to a galaxy that had learned the most human lesson of all. When something seems impossible, try doing it differently. The temporary ceasefire between the Empire and Coalition had lasted exactly 6 days when everything went wrong. Dongwu was teaching Admiral Zolthane how to play poker when every alarm on Imperial Station Nexus 7 began screaming at once. Red lights flashed throughout the station and automated voices announced emergency procedures in dozens of languages. What's happening? Dongwu asked, setting down his cards. Admiral Zolthane's crystalline body was pulsing with bright, agitated light. Something is coming through the deep void, something that should not exist. The station's command center was in chaos. Officers rushed between control stations while screens showed sensor readings that made no sense. Outside the windows, space itself seemed to be bending and twisting like water. Commander Kethra arrived with several Coalition officers. Admiral, our sensors are detecting the same anomalies. What are those things? On the main screen, dark shapes moved through space like living shadows. They were huge, bigger than the largest Imperial ships, but they seemed to exist only partially in normal reality. Parts of them faded in and out of view, as if they were swimming between dimensions. Void shepherds, Admiral Zolthane whispered. They've been sleeping in the deep void for millions of years. Our war must have disturbed them. What are void shepherds? Boram asked. She was recording everything with her translation computer. Ancient beings that feed on psychic energy, Admiral Zolthane explained. Before the Empire, before the Coalition, before any civilization we know of, they ruled the galaxy. They consumed entire species by draining their mental energy. Why did they stop? Ginny asked. They didn't stop. They went to sleep when they had eaten everything worth eating. We thought they were myths. The first Void Shepherd reached the edge of the station's defensive perimeter. Imperial warships opened fire with their most powerful weapons. Energy beams that could destroy planets struck the creature and simply disappeared, absorbed into its dark form like light falling into a black hole. The creature responded by reaching out with invisible tentacles of pure thought. Every psychic being on the Imperial ship suddenly screamed in agony. The lucky ones lost consciousness immediately. The others had their minds slowly drained away until nothing was left but empty bodies. Our weapons can't hurt them, an Imperial officer reported, and they're feeding on our crew's psychic energy. More Void Shepherds emerged from the twisted space around the station. Coalition ships arrived to help, but their weapons were equally useless. Worse, the creatures seemed to grow stronger with every psychic mind they consumed. How did your ancestors defeat them? Commander Kethra demanded. They didn't, Admiral Zolthane replied. The Void Shepherds went to sleep on their own after they had consumed most of the galaxy's psychic species. The civilizations we know today grew up in the empty space they left behind. So we're all going to die? It appears so. Dongwu watched the battle through the station's cameras. The Void Shepherds moved like nightmares given form, bending reality around themselves as they fed on the terror and mental energy of their victims. "These things hunt psychic energy?" he asked. "Yes," Admiral Zolthane said. "They sense intelligent thought across vast distances and consume it. But they only eat psychic energy? That is their food source." Dongwu looked at his crew. "Are any of us psychic?" "No," Teho replied. "Humans don't have psychic abilities at all. So these creatures can't sense us or feed on us?" Jin'ei caught on first. "Captain, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? Can these Void Shepherds affect non-psychic technology?" Dongwu asked Admiral Zolthane. I don't know. No non-psychic species has ever encountered them before." "Then let's find out." Against all protests from Imperial and Coalition officers, the crew of the Sol Dawn prepared to leave the safety of the station. Their little cargo ship would be alone in space with creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. "This is suicide," Commander Kethra said. "Maybe," Dongwu replied. "But someone has to try something different. Your ship has no shields, no energy weapons, no psychic defenses. Good. Maybe that's exactly what we need." The Sol Dawn launched from Imperial Station Nexus 7 and flew directly toward the nearest Void Shepherd. The creature was the size of a small moon, its surface rippling with patterns that hurt to look at, reality bent around it like heat waves rising from hot pavement. "Jin'ei, how are the engines?" Dongwu asked. "Running perfectly, Captain. These things aren't affecting our systems at all." "Boram, can you detect any psychic interference?" "None. It's like they don't even know we're here." The Void Shepherd was feeding on an Imperial battleship. The massive warship hung motionless in space, while the creature drained the minds of its crew. The ship's weapons had stopped firing. Its shields were down. It was completely helpless. "Wu Jin," Dongwu said. "Target that thing with everything we have. Captain, our weapons are just kinetic projectiles. How can they hurt something that big?" "Let's find out." Wu Jin fired the Sol Dawn's entire arsenal at the Void Shepherd. Bullets, missiles, and explosive shells struck the creature's dark surface. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the Void Shepherd screamed. The sound came through space itself, a psychic shriek of pain and surprise that made every telepathic being in the system clutch their heads. But the humans heard nothing. To them, the creature simply released the Imperial battleship and turned its attention toward their small ship. "It's coming after us," Teho reported. "Good. That means we heard it." The Void Shepherd moved toward them like a living storm cloud. As it got closer, the humans could see that their weapons had actually damaged it. Dark fluid leaked from wounds in its surface, and parts of its form were flickering unstably. "How is that possible?" Admiral Zolthane's voice came over the radio. "Your weapons are primitive kinetic projectiles." "Maybe that's the point," Dongwu replied. "These creatures are used to fighting psychic enemies with energy weapons. They probably don't know how to defend against simple bullets." The Void Shepherd reached out with invisible tentacles, trying to grab the Sol Dawn's crew with mental force. The humans felt nothing. The creature tried to invade their minds and found nothing to invade. It attempted to drain their psychic energy and discovered they had none to drain. "It can't affect us at all," Boram said with wonder. "We're completely invisible to its powers." "Keep shooting," Dongwu ordered. The Sol Dawn circled the frustrated Void Shepherd like a mosquito attacking an elephant. Their small weapons couldn't destroy the massive creature, but they could hurt it badly. More importantly, they proved that the ancient horrors were not invincible. Imperial and Coalition ships began following the humans' example. They turned off their psychic systems, switched to backup kinetic weapons, and attacked with simple projectiles and explosives. The Void Shepherds, confused by enemies they couldn't sense or control, began to retreat. But more creatures were emerging from the deep void. Hundreds of them awakened after millions of years of sleep. Even if humans could fight them, there weren't enough human ships in the galaxy to stop them all. "We need a better plan," Dongwu said as the Sol Dawn returned to the station. Imperial and Coalition leaders gathered in the station's main conference room. For the first time in centuries, they were working together toward a common goal. The ancient enemy of all psychic life had returned, and only the non-psychic humans seemed able to fight them effectively. The Void Shepherds feed on mental energy, Admiral Zolthane explained to the assembled officers. But they also use psychic powers to locate, attack, and control their victims. Humans are immune to all of these abilities. But there are only 5 humans here, a coalition general pointed out. We need thousands of ships to fight the invasion. Then we fight like humans, Commander Kethra said. We turn off our psychic systems, use kinetic weapons, and coordinate through non-telepathic communication. That's impossible. Our entire civilization is based on psychic technology. Ginny spoke up from her seat at the table. Then maybe it's time to learn some new tricks. Over the next several hours, the humans taught Imperial and Coalition officers how to fight without psychic abilities. They explained backup systems, kinetic weapons, mathematical navigation, and radio communication. It was like teaching advanced civilizations how to use stone tools, but it worked. As word spread throughout the galaxy, fleets began adapting human methods. They shut down their psychic networks, loaded kinetic weapons, and learned to communicate through simple radio signals. The Void Shepherds, faced with enemies they couldn't sense or control, found themselves fighting a type of warfare they had never encountered. This might actually work, Admiral Zolthane said, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. Of course it will work, Dongwu replied. Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. But even as the galaxy learned to fight like humans, more Void Shepherds continued to emerge from the deep void. The war for the galaxy's survival had only just begun.